So this video is going to be an interesting one, I think, because we're going to be talking about a type of bigotry that I guess I haven't really focused on in particular before. You see, Asian hate is real. And I've always been, as most of you will know, in my YouTube time, or my time on YouTube, I guess I should say, someone who's called out racism, pointed out how it's cringe and oftentimes rooted in some insecure, ignorant, just awful worldview that's generally easy to poke a lot of holes in, too. But I haven't really focused on the ways in which people push racism and abuse people in America specifically, because that's where I am. That's where I talk. The issues that I talk about usually are Asian Americans, how people treat them, how people are racist to them. When we talk about racism, we usually mean that in like a really broad sense, but in America at least, different groups receive racism in different ways. And this particular topic is going to be, oh, music's too loud. Thank you for telling me. This particular topic is going to be a little bit of a lighter one, but I do think it's important to talk about because this form of racism has gotten extremely normalized to the point where I found myself occasionally watching these videos and not really even realizing how problematic they were. And I'll explain why I didn't find them problematic once I explain what these videos are. How many of you are familiar with YouTubers, TikTokers, content creators online, such as Uncle Roger? You see, there is a rash of content creators online who have gone very viral in the last few years. They are themselves Asian, but if you ever heard them in like an interview or something, you might find that they look, sound, and act oftentimes very different from how they do in their videos. And you watch their videos, and oftentimes it is an extremely over-exaggerated sort of show and playing out of Asian stereotypes. And oftentimes, it's played off as, I'm just kind of making fun of my older relatives, you know, like I'm you know, young and I've got like an American accent and I'm super Americanized, but you know, my grandma or my aunt, they're so silly, you know, they talk so funny and just making jokes about them, right? And I used to think there's nothing wrong with this. It's just making, or yeah, like the emotional damage guy too is a good example. I used to think it's like, can it really be problematic or racist if you're just making fun of your own family members? Like if you're just joking, like if my grandma had like a thick Italian accent, would it be problematic if I was like, oh, I love the spaghetti whenever I saw her? Like, I don't know if that would have been like problematic. But the more that I think about it, especially after watching the video we're about to watch, it seems very insidious, especially how broad and corporatized it's gotten and how much it seems to be getting cheered on by white people. Or I shouldn't even say white people. Non-Asians seem to be the ones that are getting the most humor out of these videos. And I don't know if that's a good thing, because I don't know if they're getting the humor for the right reasons. This video should explain it quite concisely. It's actually a relatively new video. It came out about 3 weeks ago. Now this guy, Hans Y, the YouTuber who made the video we're about to watch, actually put out a prequel to this video about a year ago, and the internet jumped down his throat for it, because naturally you're not allowed to criticize anyone who isn't a perfect target, right? And when you criticize a large public figure who is very well liked and doesn't necessarily have much broad controversy under their belt, if you criticize them, especially from a political angle, you are going to get dunked on. And so this guy did get dunked on, but a year later, he's come out with a new video, and it's titled Exploiting Asians for Profit, Uncle Roger and Stephen Hay. So let's go ahead and check out this video. I've watched a little bit of it myself, and I have to say, I found it, at least in the first 5 minutes, so compelling, I decided to set it aside and watch it on stream. This wasn't recommended to me, by the way. I found this on Reddit, and I watched a bit of it and was like, you know what? I'm going to set this aside for stream because this is a really good conversation starter. Hate Snow, thank you for the $5 super chat. This is actually relevant to the topic. I know the topic you're about to bring up, and as an Asian American that's been bothered by this, thank you. Wong Fu Prod talks about this too. Okay, cool. I'll have to check out Wong Fu Productions. I'll go ahead and check out that video after stream probably, because I've noticed these videos and these channels taking over YouTube Shorts, TikTok, every social media, and I kind of see the problem with it now. Now that I've had it explained to me, I see the problem, and I want to show you guys, who many of you in chat don't even seem to know that this is a thing. I want to show you guys what's going on. So let's hop into this. Thank you, by the way, Hate Snow, for the $5. I really appreciate it. Let's watch.
How do you feel about this video?
What's she doing? What's she doing?
What about this?
Oh, my dad rock this. He always.
Or this?
Oh, you feel hungry. Oh, you feel hungry.
Now ask yourself honestly, are they really that different from videos like
We get into it with a very compelling opening. A very compelling opening. What is wrong with those clips, guys? I also want to point out, by the way, I'm pretty sure the guy at the start...
How do you feel about this video?
What's she doing? What's she doing?
Isn't that guy literally doing like an impression of Uncle Roger, who's one of the creators that this video is about? Like that is literally a white dude who has been inspired by Uncle Roger, one of the creators this video is calling out, to do that impression where it's gotten to the point now where, like, maybe it's okay if someone who is Asian does that, but once you've inspired white people to start doing it, it's like, okay, well, clearly the joke has gotten beyond the target audience and the target intention and is now having an impact that I would hope that you don't agree with, right? Like, pretty straightforward stuff.
About this?
Oh, my dad rock this. He always.
Or this?
Oh, you feel hungry. Oh, you feel hungry.
Now ask yourself honestly, are they really that different from videos like this?
Where the hell is my show? What the hell are you doing?
Stupid, dumb, ugly, trash, pollution.
Why do Asian people hate the football? Okay, I have the big screen TV. I have the Blu-ray player. That's just making me so soup.
I feel like the more of these clips that you guys see, the more you will realize, oh, I have seen these videos before. Like a bunch of these channels, just over the years, I've seen these channels and never really thought much of it. Like this one, Korean comic, Lilo and Stitch explained by an Asian. These videos, now that I think back to it, are pretty fucking racist. And the only reason why it didn't perk up my eyebrows at the time was because the channel that made it was called Korean Comic. Like, feels like they're getting paid? Oh, listen. They're prominent, big, public figures with large platforms. They're getting paid. I promise you they are. Not by, like, some shady organization that wants to push Asian hate or something or normalize this kind of shit. But, they're getting paid out by racist white people that like to hear jokes made by people who are part of minority groups, made at the expense of those minority groups, because it makes them feel like, as white people, they don't need to be ashamed of laughing at those groups whom they, as racist white people, find laughable. It normalizes it.
Movie begins with
They see it as permission.
female Voldemort.
What the hell you say, huh?
My mom's like, I find this not funny. You wanna make fun of us, huh? You wanna make fun of Asian time?
Does he have a microchip that says do a damn goofy Vietnamese voice?
Making fun of Asians for entertainment is nothing new. We had white actors doing yellowface in the 60s.
That was 2 weeks ago. You cannot go on or keep ringing my bell.
Asian actors playing racist caricatures in movies. Asian comedians making jokes about being Asian on television.
I want him to be doctor, but instead he like, ha ha ha.
And Asians doing all the above on social media since its very inception.
B+, what the hell?
B+? B+?
Today we'll be discussing why people
I will say, it's actually kind of crazy when you think about it, how often this exact pattern happens. It feels like if you're a person of color, obviously it's pretty hard to break into certain industries, right? Even being a comedian can be difficult if you're a person of color, right? Like, I'm pretty sure as a comedian, you have to find a way to get booked at certain events, set up advertising, and you know, get your name out there so people show up and you're worth being booked at these events. You have to leave people with a good impression so they continuously come back. Like, it's work. And like, businesses can just turn you down at the door and say, no, we're not going to book you here. And so if you're a person of color and you're dealing with certain biases among probably mostly white comedy show owners, you're probably going to have a lot harder time getting into the industry than someone who's just like a straight white guy, right? Who you know, no one would even think about their identity, right? That guy's Dave. He's not a straight white guy. That's just Dave, you know? And so with that in mind, it feels like there's always been, at least for as long as I've been alive, I've noticed that in comedy, there has always been a easy, cheap, it feels like, shameless path to success in doing racial humor. Like, any kind of racial humor. Usually, like, the kind of shit that you would have to be the race you are to make those jokes. And it's always a crowd of white people laughing when you watch those comedy show clips. Dave Chappelle, I would actually say, yeah, Dave Chappelle is someone who is in this position, and famously Dave Chappelle changed his comedy shows because at a certain time he was a progressive guy, or at least on racial issues he was progressive, because he didn't like that. I think he had said that, like, the white people in the crowd were always laughing at his edgy race jokes longer than the black people in the crowd were, and he didn't like that. There was something about that just stuck with him, and he was like, why were those white people laughing longer and harder than anyone else at that very edgy joke? Like, it was funny, but man, they were laughing like I struck a chord deep inside them with that comment, you know? And Dave Chappelle ended up changing his comedy routine when it comes to racial humor substantially after that. It feels like it's like a cheap cop-out that a lot of comedians of color, not all of them, but a lot of them have taken in the past and even today, and it's kind of led to prominent figures that are quote-unquote comedians who are known for doing racial humor end up just being awful. I remember that a couple years ago there was a similar drama to this over a Vine YouTuber or a Vine, like, a TikToker guy named King Batch, who would just do, like, the most racist skits you could imagine, but he's a black guy. So, I mean, I guess it's not racist, I suppose, when he does a skit about, like, I don't even know, like, I'm trying to think of an example, but they would be very racist, usually centered around, like, old school anti-black stereotypes, like literal fried chicken shit, like that kind of humor, like genuinely just low tier racist humor. This has long been a problem, and more recently I've seen that it's become a particular issue among prominent Asian comics, particularly online. Not necessarily in the mainstream all that much, though it is a problem there, but especially on the internet, this is a big problem, especially online.
People enjoy laughing at Asians. Why so many Asians volunteer to be humiliated? The negative effects those Asians have on society. And how come most Asians don't criticize them and even allow them to become the faces of our community? I know right now a bunch of people are typing, Hans, it's just a joke, it's comedy, you just don't understand comedy, comedy can't be racist. That's why I'm going to let comedy legend Chris Rock make my first point for me. In the 90s, Chris Rock had an extremely popular comedy routine where he explained the difference between
Black people?
Millions of people have seen it. Chances are you have too. It had significant pop culture relevance.
Chuds love that clip. They genuinely love it. Any clip that, like, white people can find in which a black guy, or any non-white person, but it's usually a black guy, says that, like, racism doesn't matter, or says something like that almost seems to endorse white people being less racially aware or politically correct. It's like, oh my god, yes, thank you, oh my god. That's how all of them respond. They just want permission to either A, not have to care about racism, or B, they want permission to outright be racist and to not be criticized for it.
relevance.
Every time black people want to have a good time, some ignorant ass I take care of my kids is always want credit for something they're supposed to do.
Kids at my school were imitating that skit every day. My school in Australia, which was 99% white. Despite its popularity, Chris Rock stopped doing that routine. No, not because he was cancelled or whatever. He stopped voluntarily because he knew he was encouraging.
Yeah, the Morgan Freeman quote. Yeah, Pepper T21, I know what you're talking about. Yeah, just stop talking about racism. That's how you beat it. Just stop talking about it.
All the wrong types of people to say the N-word and therefore causing harm to the black community. You might also remember Dave Chappelle made a similar choice. He walked away from money and fame when he realized his jokes were causing people to laugh at black people, not with them. Now, if you are wondering,
How come?
I don't think it was that he, like, stopped doing comedy at the time because of it. I think it was, like, he changed his way of handling racial humor. It's hard to put into words. I do recommend, I know that Dave Chappelle is not very well liked these days by the left due to his anti-trans positions, but his old comedy specials are really funny. And if you're a progressive person who can responsibly, like, enjoy edgy humor and not be influenced badly by it, obviously, then it's very fun to listen to. It's very funny. It's just very much a product of its time, you know, but it's very edgy humor and it's very good. But at the same time, if people are laughing for the wrong reasons, then I understand why Dave Chappelle didn't want to continue that type of humor.
Chris Rock can do a routine, and everybody finds it hilarious and groundbreaking. And then I go and do the exact same routine, same comedic timing, and people file a complaint to corporate.
that's because audience and intention matter. There is a huge difference between sharing an inside joke with your own community versus pandering to outsiders, reinforcing negative stereotypes, and giving people permission to laugh at your own community.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. Pandering to... There's a big difference between making inside jokes and pandering to outsiders. That's what's happening here. It is pandering to outsiders with the kind of humor that racist white people, like, do, but from someone who is Asian, while framing it as though, because they are Asian, it's just an inside joke. Like, I'm just making fun of my aunt. I'm just making fun of my grandma or my mom. You know, they're old and they've got, like, a thick accent and all that. And they're oh yeah. And then you just go down the list of stereotypes, right? Like, it's always like, oh, your grades aren't high enough. Oh, that's an expensive thing. Oh, you're making this type of food wrong. It's always like those three basic stereotypes. And then, like, a really thick accent. And sometimes they'll even, like, go even further with it. Like, it depends on how much they're willing to stretch the wings of Icarus, if you know what I mean.
That's why numerous Asian actors in Hollywood have refused to play negative Asian stereotypes or make fun of Asian accents for non-Asian audiences to laugh at. But some people are more selfish. For example, the most popular Asian influencers of our current day and age, Nigel Ang, also known as Uncle Roger.
What you doing? Drain the... Oh my god! Nobody use tomato for Thai red curry.
I view Uncle Roger as a celebration of Asianness and Asian culture and Asian things in general. Uncle Roger never puts his own race down.
Wuhan! Why you eat that bat? Why you eat that bat?
To the people who accuse me of that character being a racist caricature,
Is he going through the wars or something?
I would say our urge.
Like, that's the thing, though. If he just owned that, yes, he is playing a racist caricature, and that is the joke, that it's meant to be edgy, if he owned it and said, but if you're laughing at it because you don't like Asians or you think Asians are worth ridicule, then go fuck yourself. You're not part of this group. We're not laughing with you. Like, even that kind of message would hit hard and would honestly, I think, alleviate him of a massive amount of responsibility for the potential negative impact of his rhetoric. The problem is that he's saying this shit to defend himself, but if you watch his content, it's very clear that he is playing an Asian stereotype character that isn't anything like himself, or at least isn't really like himself in the way they come off on camera, in order to satisfy the racist sense of humor of probably mostly white people.
Them to actually listen to the things I'm saying and see that everything I say is lifting our people up.
And Stephen Heilburn also.
I've heard a number of specifically Cantonese people who have accents like that, but my question is, why is that supposed to be funny? I think we can all agree that accents can be funny without it being racist. I think the problem is that a lot of accents associated with, like, non-white cultures have kind of become taboo to joke about or do an impression of if you're white in particular, because of the associated assumption that if you're doing that, then you're probably doing it to, like, ridicule a group that's already getting some shit, you know, or gotten quite a bit of shit, you know, like there's extra attachment to it, right? Like, I think that British accents are silly, Canadian accents are silly, Australian accents are silly. And when you think of an Australian, a British person, or a Canadian, you don't really think of any particular race, because these are kind of like melting pot countries. And if you do think of anyone of any particular race at all, it's probably a white person, just based off of, like, whatever biases you might have. And so you don't really find it racist if I go, oh my god, oh, the kangaroos, they've broken down the fence, they're letting the emus in, we're gonna lose the second great emu war, oh no. Like, you don't find that racist when I make fun of Australian silly accent, but when you do that about groups that are not, like, specifically accents associated with, like, an ethnic group, it gets a little touchy in that way. And so that's the thing, right? There's so much ambiguity in this, because they could just argue, no, accents are just silly. It doesn't matter, like, what ethnicity it comes from. It's just accents can be silly, right? I don't talk like my family members that are older do. So I find how they talk silly. Like, you could totally get away with criticism for this, and they often do, by saying that. By basically just saying, I just find the accent funny, like you would find any accent you're not used to funny. Simple as that. That's probably what they would use as an excuse.
So known as Stephen He.
You don't know how easy you have it, huh? Every time I turn the AC on, I get whooped by my grandpa for wasting money. Emotional damage. Emotional damage. Hide under the table.
That meme is, like, immense, by the way. Everyone knows the emotional damage meme. Everyone has heard that sound bit.
Nigel and Steven are icons of our generation, each having tens of millions of followers and billions of views combined, mostly gained from playing racist Asian caricatures, perpetuating negative stereotypes, and making fun of Asian accents for Western audiences. We'll discuss intention later. For now, let's focus on
Is that a fucking neon sign rice cooker in the background? That caught my eye, because I literally just got a rice cooker like 3 days ago. And so I noticed the silhouette. I never would have noticed that. But that is absolutely a neon sign rice cooker. This is the digital display here. Here are the buttons. I guess this isn't the same as what I have, but I would assume this would be like the heating button and this would be the cook your rice button. And then obviously here's the lid. You know, pop up the lid. Like, you get what I mean now, where, like, it's not just, like, the humor. It's that a lot of these creators' whole brand is the, like, joking about Asian stereotypes, right? Like, down to, like, I promise you there's not a neon sign rice cooker on the wall because he loves rice cookers. It's because part of his brand is, like, being overly over-the-top stereotype of an Asian boomer.
For Western audiences. We'll discuss intention later. For now, let's focus on their audience. What types of people are actually watching Uncle Roger and Stephen He Burn, and how does that affect the Asian community? Of course, it's difficult to obtain such audience data. We could make speculations based on social media user demographics, but I want something a bit more concrete. So I did my own social experiment. For my first upload on this channel, I made a concise and direct video about the harmful effects of Uncle Roger and Stephen He Burn. The key points I made were: number 1, Nigel Ahn and Stephen He Burn were perpetuating negative Asian stereotypes. Number 2, they were pandering to non-Asian.
That's a neon sign of his favorite model of rice cooker. At least that's his explanation. I mean, so I was completely right. I recognized it correct. It's definitely, I know it's a rice cooker. It's unmistakably so. They all tend to look like that, unless it's just one of those cheap ones that has like a lid on the top.
Audiences who have historically enjoyed mocking nations. Number 3, they were normalizing the
He actually loves rice cookers and makes fun of people who don't use them. Yes, I know that. I am aware of that, Spaceman. The reason why he does that is mostly because that is part of his character. Like, one of the stereotypes of older, like, Asian boomers in America is that if you don't make your rice with a rice cooker, you're gonna get made fun of. That's part of the stereotype thing. Like that's, yeah. I feel like I live in a simulation when I literally go and I get a rice cooker 3 days ago. This topic comes up in my Reddit last night, and I decide I'm gonna cover it. Like I didn't even know that like the discussion of a rice cooker on the wall would be part of this discussion. But it really feels like I live in a simulation when those two things happen so close together by complete fucking coincidence. Rice cooker rice is amazing. Dude, it really fucking is, though. Like, listen, I'm not saying you shouldn't get a rice cooker. You should. I just got one for good reason, okay? But yeah, I mean, I'm just making... The point is that it's all part of these creators' brand, is the character that they play.
Mocking of Asians for humor. Number 4. If you are an Asian who enjoys their content, then you have no right to call out racism against Asians or the lack of positive Asian representation in Western media. And number 5. You cannot call yourself progressive and inclusive while enjoying laughing at racist Asian caricatures. And I got exactly the response I expected. Thousands of comments and dislikes from just 40,000 views. Enough data for us to separate all the comments into 10 different audience groups.
You know what sucks about this too? At some point, there is going to be a general consensus that all these points are correct, and most of the online Asian American community is going to start calling out these creators. It's going to take a few years, but it'll happen. And the problem with that is that this guy who has gone out there, stuck his neck out to call these creators who are much larger and have very rabid audiences out for what they're doing, I doubt he's going to get the credit for being the first motherfucker to call these guys out. Probably not the first, but like the first with a large enough platform to garner a substantial amount of hate for calling them out.
First, you have people who just straight up left racist comments. Next, you have people who think I shouldn't be so sensitive about people laughing at Asians. Then you have people who blatantly admitted they were laughing at Asians and the Asian accent. People who try to deflect with whataboutisms. For example, we also make fun.
Having a neon sign of a rice cooker in an Asian YouTube channel is the equivalent of having a neon sign saying, I love boobs on a Chud channel. Like, I don't even know what the, like... I guess the best equivalent would be if... I don't know. What can I think of as, like, an equivalent? I feel like if I make up a scenario, then I'm going to end up being the racist one. So we're gonna just stop and... You know what, Moody Mooney? You are braver than I to give an example, because I don't want to get clipped, okay? Listen, the clip farmers are always watching. They're my biggest fans. They're always here.
Of other accents, not just Asian accents. And Asians are the most racist, Asians are rude, etc, etc, etc. We also have people who claim they are watching to learn about Asian culture. A legion of 12-year-olds. Asians who think it's...
I'm watching... I dislike Uncle Roger for teaching me about Asian cooking. I understand where you're coming from, though. This is the thing, though. Unironically, the cooking videos that some of these creators make are decently high quality. Not necessarily in their informative aspect, but in their editing, presentation, and entertainment aspect. They're a lot more entertaining than most cooking videos will be. And so if you look up, like, how to cook a certain dish, if Uncle Roger has done a video on how to cook that dish, that video will be the first thing that comes up.
They are watching to learn about Asian culture. A legion of 12-year-olds. Asians who think it's not a big deal. Who left comments like, it's just a joke. Lighten up. As a nation, I find it funny. As a nation, I'm not offended. Then you have people who agree these influences are problematic.
I will say, by the way, I don't know how many... I don't know how many of these... Like, I don't... Does anyone who's part of a group ever say, as someone who's part of this group, I find this funny? Like, I don't feel like anyone who's part of these groups ever just states it. Like, it's always... The meme has always been that it's like a white person who says this kind of shit. You know? Like, who remembers that one white Republican politician who pretended to be a black guy who was gay and supported him in order to try and, like, pretend to be someone who could go online and defend him, quote-unquote, against claims of racism and homophobia. And then he accidentally replied to a tweet without switching to his alt. Yeah.
Nation are not offended, then you have people who agree these influences are problematic. However, they feel powerless to do anything about it. And of course, Asians who are watching because they find the content relatable. And people who agree laughing at Asians is bad. Now you can easily argue Uncle Roger and Steven his content negatively influences every single audience group. Before we talk about that, it's important to remember Nigel and Steven's content used to be very different. Nigel was doing regular stand-up comedy.
You know, lived in Britain for a while, I learned that.
Before turning into a caricature.
He putting mango chutney into pan.
How much do you want to bet that he had one comedy bit where he did the accent and like did that like bit or made fun of like let's say he did a bit where he was like making fun of his uncle, let's say, and doing an impression of his uncle. That clip goes way more viral than anything he's ever done. He realizes that's what will really hit for him, and he starts leaning into that heavy as his brand, and now he is who he is. I guarantee you that's how he got to where he is today. I guarantee you, he just did the joke once, because it might be funny as like a one-time thing, saw how well it did, and said, I need to turn that into an entire brand. I guarantee you that's what he did.
Mango chutney.
Steven was your typical reaction YouTuber.
Can I eat my Himalayan salt lamp?
Before perpetuating negative stereotypes about Asian fathers, even though he had a stepdad who was white, Steven and Nigel are Asians living in the West, catering to a westernized audience. And they are performing a genre of comedy I like to call Asian exploitation comedy. It's like self-deprecating humor, except you are not making jokes about yourself. You're making jokes about your entire race. These are racist jokes anyone knows how to make.
Right.
He's like,
Dude, who is this
jokes
guy?
about your entire race. These are racist.
This guy, okay, this guy is the king of this shit. I see him on podcast clips all over YouTube Shorts, and it's always like, he's probably the most like, Bobby Lee is his name. He's probably the most like edgy about it as well. He would probably just call it edgy. Like a lot of it isn't even like doing the sort of like humor where you're doing like an impression. He doesn't do that. He just outright makes jokes about how one of his bits, actually, I saw recently, was literally about how if you're Asian and have an accent, that is simply worth making fun of. Because he, as, I guess, an Asian guy who doesn't have much of an accent, he sees himself, I guess, as superior to Asians who have an accent. Like he sees it as a point of, like, shame or to make fun of. Like, there was a clip where he's like, whoa, are you one of the Asians who can't say L's? Who's seen that clip? That's a viral one on YouTube Shorts. He's on all these podcasts doing these bits. He's part of the Joe Rogan crew. Does not surprise me. He comes off a lot like Joe Rogan, to be honest.
Jokes anyone knows how to make.
Right.
He's like, I saw your tray flip. It was bad. You tray flip in? I saw that.
Like I'm starting up a car.
Japanese.
It's the same as black comedians who only make jokes about like watermelon.
They're the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. They're serving in my home. I don't want them alone. Yes, Lord.
God, Vine. Yep. I knew it had to get mentioned. Dude, Vine. If you were not around in 2016, then you don't know about Vine. Vine. 2016 was the original, like, right-wing explosion of, like, racism and right-wing politics online. And a big part of what contributed to it was the fact that Vine had become, like, the biggest platform in the world, and so much of the humor was just the worst race humor, and like 90% of the anti-black racist humor was being done by black creators in order to pander to a enormous white audience. Enormous. At least we had fun ones like Road Work Ahead, I Sure Hope It Does, and Free Shavakadu, which was reading of fresh avocado on a Chipotle sign, but the letters were like spaced out, and so it read out like Free Shavakadu, and I still find that one quite funny to this day. Yeah, Free Shavakadu went hard.
And really think about why content featuring degenerate caricatures are being pushed so hard by social media algorithms. Who exactly has the most to gain from all this? Because it's certainly not Asians, who these comedians unfortunately represent. Especially when you consider we live in a social climate where Asians are actively disadvantaged by persistent stereotypes, where most Asian Americans feel like they don't belong in America, especially young Asian Americans, where Asian Americans don't feel safe in their neighborhoods, where every Asian will experience some form of racism and discrimination. Influencers like Nigel Ahn and Stephen He help shape societal norms.
3 sticks of butter for 2 sticks.
By reinforcing negative Asian stereotypes at such a large scale, they empower people's desire to be racist by allowing them to hide behind the excuse of comedy. This in turn normalizes the mocking of Asians for laughs. I mean, it's...
I think it's important to point out that, like, there are 2 types of comedy fundamentally. Or actually, I'd say there's 3 types of comedy. Like, at the most fundamental levels. Like, why are things funny? Well, you've got probably the most common type of comedy, which is absurdist. Just like, that is simply silly. Like you've presented a setup and a punchline that just ends up making you laugh with how cleverly constructed the line of logic is. And it's usually something very absurd, and the fact that it is an absurd concept that maybe makes sense if you explain it a certain way or with the setup and punchline written the way it is, it creates a comedic effect. You've got humor that is just meant to be scathingly edgy. Like, it's funny because you are shocked by how taboo the humor itself is. And you're not supposed to agree with it. You're not supposed to think it's true or anything, but it is meant to be so wrong that the fact that they're doing it is funny, right? Like, think original South Park, why people loved original South Park, like the way that it kind of pushed the bars so much, like and got away with at the time, like due to the laws of what you could put on TV, like they bent the rules so much that laws were changed. That was like a big deal, and that's part of what made South Park so funny, was just, I can't believe they just said that, you know? But then there's like the third fundamental type of humor, and that is, it's funny because it's true. Most comedians that do stand-up are comedians like this. One of my favorite comedian, period, is a great example of a comedian like this, and that's George Carlin. When you listen to a George Carlin joke, it's a joke, but he's not joking, if that makes sense. One of my favorite bits is his bit about stuff. Like, life is about collecting stuff, and when you have your house, it's just a place where you put all your stuff, and then you leave and go on vacation. You just have to find your most important stuff and take that with you, because you can't take a lot of stuff on the plane, and you driving or flying over, and you're just seeing all these people's piles of stuff. Like, I love that bit, right? And the reason it's funny is that as he builds up the narrative of the humor, it continues to be true. Like, every bit of it is like, yes, this is so fucking true, but he is saying something that is true in such a funny and cathartic and cleverly constructed way that it's comedy gold. The problem is, and the 2 relevant types of humor here for this conversation are it's funny because it is bending the rules of what is okay and what is taboo, and the fact that you consider it wrong and yet it was said is what is it's shock humor, and it's funny in that case if it's executed well, or if it's funny because it's true, quote unquote. If people are laughing at these figures because they find their representations to be like, aha, now see, even Asian people agree with my perception, my stereotype perception of Asians, right? When that's how people, or why people are laughing at it, when they see it as like an affirmation of what they believe, and they're laughing because they find these representations to be speaking to a true criticism of Asians, that is the type of humor that I worry a lot of people are interpreting this as. Not just shock humor that's meant to be wrong, and you're meant to interpret it as wrong, and that's why it's supposed to be funny. No. People might and are interpreting this as it's funny because it's true humor, which is very different and has very different implications. People have their politics changed by it's funny because it's true humor, but then people will still say but it's just a joke. Someone will do a whole comedy sketch in which the joke is that they are doing a 50 paragraph long takedown of trans rights, Dave Chappelle, and people say, why are you criticizing what he said? It's just jokes. And it's like, well, at this point, he literally says, there's no such thing as a trans person. Is that a joke? Because he just continues to talk about how they're not real, and the comedy special is about making fun of trans people. Like, it's not jokes. It's supposed to be funny if you don't like trans people because you find the jokes to be apt criticisms of them. I don't know. Maybe I'm lingering on this point too much, but I think the way in which people try to sideline criticism by saying they're just doing comedy is really cheap and pathetic, because I find comedy to be one of the most compelling and important ways of delivering real information that is meant to persuade people. Like, probably the most valuable way to convince and communicate information with people. And so acting as though comedy means like, oh, it was just a joke, that means nothing of value or importance was said. It's like, what? No, comedy is probably was invented to help us communicate.
It's just a joke, right? Making fun of Asians is so normalized, people become offended by Asians.
Yeah, oftentimes you can ask them to explain the joke and why they find it funny, and that will be very telling. Good point, your results, Fitness.
For being offended. After all, if Uncle Roger can make fun of Asians, I can too, right?
Hiya, ching chong ding dong. Relax, it can't be racist, it's comedy.
Asian exploitation comedy also harms young Asians, especially in the West, where positive representations of Asians are extremely limited. When Asians are always the punching bags, it's going to encourage internalized racism and self-hatred and cause young nations to feel pressured to conform to negative stereotypes in exchange for social acceptance from non-Asians.
Good morning.
Good day, very good day.
Asians wear glasses but not contacts.
Okay, it's the first time, right? Oh, what the f? Why no fit?
Hi, Mom. Do your homework. I'm going out with some friends, Mom. Do your homework.
And surely I'm not the only one who finds it bizarre people are okay with Uncle Roger making fun of Ukraine, making weird jokes about children.
Stop fingering your rice, Jesus. The rice 1 day old, not 16-year-old. Stop fingering it.
And on other people all the time, all because he's faking a nation.
I'm not the only one who heard that, right? Let's rewind. Rewind.
One who finds it bizarre people are okay with Uncle Roger making fun of Ukraine, making weird jokes about children.
Stop fingering your rice, Jesus. The rice 1 day old, not 16-year-old. Stop fingering it.
And on other.
Okay.
People all the time, all because he's faking an Asian accent while doing it. And Stephen Hilburn, well, he is literally doing racist stereotypes about Asian dads when he grew up with a white stepdad. Are we living in a clown world?
He's a comedian? What's the joke, YouTube 91? YouTube 91, just tell me what the joke is. I didn't get it. I'm not smart enough to get the joke. Tell me what the joke is. Explain it to me. I didn't say a good one, but that's not an explanation of what the joke is. What was the joke? Why not explain what the joke was? I'm fucking with you a little bit, YouTube. I'm sorry. I don't mean to put you on the spot like this, but I feel like I'm making a pretty strong point right now just by asking this question.
And you know what's actually funny? This video of a guy mocking Uncle Roger is more entertaining than Uncle Roger himself.
First, you want to beat the egg. You want to beat the egg like you beat your children after they come home with a B on the report card. Like you, Erica.
Now, if you are wondering, Hans, if Asian exploitation humor is so harmful, then why do so many Asians do it? Money is because of money. Business is all about supply and demand. And all throughout human history, we know for a fact there is a huge demand for content of minorities, making fun of minorities. It's a massive market, and it's much easier for minorities to find success by selling out versus trying to fight against the system. Think about how many famous westernized Asians became successful by making fun of Asian accents and stereotypes. The face of Asians in traditional media is not talented actors like John Cho, Daniel Day Kim, Steven Yeun, or Manny Jacinto. It's Ken Jeong.
I work with that Asian guy. What's his name? Dude from The Hangover? Yeah, what's his name?
You know, I worked for that chick.
Dude. Oh, that's Chevy Chase, right? For those that don't know, Chevy Chase is literally his character in Community. You know that, right? Like, Chevy Chase is a racist old piece of shit, and he is literally Pierce. He's playing himself in Community. Like, his politics are awful. He is literally Pierce he's playing himself in that show. They hired him as the actor to play him because he is just the character they wrote for Pierce. And so he's perfect because he's just playing himself. It's completely believable. So yeah, he's quite racist, just like he is in the show. He did, in fact, just drop a slur there, very casually. At least Pierce dies. That is true. Spoiler alert. But yeah, like obviously he's talking about like they were like on Community together, and he, like, obviously you've got a lot of racist jokes in the show, but the fact that one of the actors in the show is also like actually racist, it's like, ooh. Zan, I disagree hard with the video. Steven Yeun is becoming like the most prominent Asian actor in America. I don't know, man. Like, I don't know. I would actually say, for one, dude, Invincible is not as big as The Walking Dead, okay? Like Invincible is big. It's huge. It's a very big phenomenon, but The Walking Dead was like nothing else. Like, the only thing comparable to The Walking Dead as a phenomenon was the MCU. Like, I need you guys to understand that no, for the most part, when it comes to mainstream Hollywood and recognizable household names, most Asian American actors are quite known for playing into stereotypes heavily to appease the racist sensibilities of Americans. That is a real problem. And as much as you may want to cope and say, well, there's some examples that are good, and there are good examples. And I'm glad it's the case. But overall, the inevitable result of America being a generally racist country means that the people here tend to rally support around those that are willing to pander to their racism. And Steven Yeun doesn't do that. And so he's big, don't get me wrong. He's worked hard to get where he is. He's worked some pretty goddamn great roles. But, I mean, he's not as popular as a lot of these figures that are guilty of this problem.
And of course on social media, the largest Asian influencers are people like Uncle Roger, Stephen He, and Bobby Lee. Yes, we get it, Asians eat dogs, ha ha ha, so funny. Where did you get your jokes from? The 1920s? Look, Bruce Lee, a man who died 50 years ago, is still the most well-known positive representation of Asians to this day. So if you are an Asian who only cares about fame and fortune, then it makes sense for you to be a clown and start making fun of your parents' accent. This self-humiliation formula even works for white comedians in Asia.
Wait, really? Wait, there are white comedians in Asian countries doing humor about being white? Okay, listen, I know I'm kind of going against the point of this video, but I low-key want to watch some of those. I'm curious, like, what jokes hit the hardest? Like, what jokes do people outside of America find the funniest about white people who are Americans? I'm kind of curious about that. I gotta park my car. We do drive cars, and we do have to park them. And a lot of America is parking, so I guess that is apt. That's a real... That stereotype about America is just true. Redneck humor is a thing in Europe? Yeah.
Comedy is actually pretty easy. If you're an Asian comic, just get up and say, my mother's got the weirdest accent. My mom's like, I think that's funny. Damn.
Bo Burnham calling this shit out. Let's go. I'm not disappointed. I'm never disappointed by Bo Burnham. He continues to cook.
You wanna make fun of us, huh? You wanna make fun of Asian time? Then just do a Chinese accent. Everybody laugh at the Chinese accent because they privately thought that your people were laughable, and now you've given them the chance to express that in public.
Damn, he hit the nail on the head there. Hot damn. Like I said, guys, I'm curious to see what the response to this is today, because when he released his original video, the general response was quite negative. And these YouTubers, these figures, these actors, they were not figures that were targets that the internet approved of to be criticized. And so, obviously, they were defended ruthlessly. But I'm curious to see what the response is nowadays. Let's see. Bruce Lee became a good role model because of the passive influence he gave kids. While I got bullied for having a Chinese quote-unquote accent, I curbed that negativity knowing that I have the same Cantonese accent as Bruce Lee. That's a good comment. I'm Arab. I feel the same way about the Arab comedy skit creators that were big in the 2010s that stereotype brown people just like Uncle Roger and Stephen Hay, stereotyping Asians. Thankfully, I don't live in the West, so I didn't have to rely on those people growing up for representation, but the damage they have done to my generation in the West is palpable. Quote, strict immigrant parents and, quote, Muslim equals terrorist humor is what people had to grow up with. Anytime I've tried to speak out about it, I've gotten the same responses you have. It's a different situation, I'm sure, but oh, does it feel similar or familiar? Thank you for speaking up. I think some westernized Asians make fun of Asian stereotypes to psychologically distance themselves from Asians in Asia. As if they make fun of Asians hard enough, other people will stop seeing them as Asians. By the way, Uncle Roger was never banned on Chinese social media. His Xiaohongshu, Chinese Instagram, and Weibo accounts were both up. He just stopped posting on them. He used the whole CCP banned me as a way to promote his show in the US and Taiwan. Interesting. I'm glad to see that the comments are not a toxic cesspool right now. I'm sure there's a lot of negative ones, don't get me wrong. Do I sort by newest? Oh, here's a good idea of how the fans of these people respond. Oh no, what are they going to do? Everyone, this insignificant creator with a fraction of their subscriber count is saying their videos are no good. They're done. Seriously, are you saying that black people can't say the word? This video changes nothing. I found that more often than not, if you are progressive and you call out a large problematic figure, prepare to have the fact that you are not an extremely successful millionaire pointed out as if it is a fundamental flaw in your argument. They have made entire videos going after me with this claim. It's quite common. Oh yeah? Well, you're broke. Argument destroyed. To be fair, it does work sometimes. Anyway, guys, I really liked that video. I thought it did a really good job of talking about this issue, and I hope that you guys in chat who did not know what I was talking about at the start of this segment now know about this situation, and maybe if you were fans of these creators, you now see them in a different light. If you do, or you have an interesting bit of input on this situation, I would love to read your comments. Not to mention your likes as well, as combined with your comments, are the best and totally free way to support my videos and my streams, so I appreciate everyone who hits that thumbs up button and leaves a comment. Thank you, thank you. Hit the subscribe button if you haven't already and you want YouTube to tell you when I go live and upload new videos in the future. Follow my social medias linked down below in the description of this video if you want to see more stuff from me on other platforms, including my Blue Sky, and don't forget to join my fan Discord too, because after stream today, I'm going to be hosting a watch party of a little more Arcane. We're going to be, I think, finishing up season 1, or no, I think starting season 2 of Arcane in the Discord server after stream today. So I hope to see you guys there. Make sure to join. And of course, if you haven't already, but you want to support me directly and you can afford it, you feel like it, then consider donating, subscribing, or gifting a sub on my website, xanderhall.com/live, or support me through YouTube, Twitch, Streamlabs, Stream Elements, Patreon, or buy some merch through the Streamlabs link down below in the description if you want to support me directly, help keep the lights on, the roof above my head here at the Xander Hall studio. Regardless, though, I really do appreciate you just for being here, as always, and I hope to see you again.